The multimillion-dollar mansion echoed with the kind of silence that money couldn't buy and couldn't break. 25-year-old girls sat at a dining table worth more than most people's cars, eating breakfast in complete silence. Their spoons clinked against fine china bowls, but no giggles filled the air. No requests for more juice. No complaints about vegetables. Nothing. Have you ever been in a room so quiet it felt like the walls were closing in? Hi, viewers. Kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. David Anderson, Atlanta's most powerful CEO, was losing a battle he didn't know how to fight. His own daughters hadn't spoken in 2 years. What kind of pain silences children so completely? Stay with me, because what broke them will shock you. David stood in the doorway of the breakfast room, his 6-foot frame filling the space like a monument to success. His tailored suit cost more than most people made in a month, but it couldn't hide the defeat in his shoulders. The breakfast room gleamed with marble countertops and crystal chandeliers, but the silence was so thick it seemed to absorb light itself. Lily picked at her organic blueberries while Lucy stared through floor-to-ceiling windows at the perfectly manicured garden. Two little ghosts haunting a house that had everything except what mattered most. The twins looked exactly like their mother. Golden hair that caught sunlight like spun silk, eyes the color of summer sky. But where Samantha had been fire and passion, the girls were ice and emptiness. "Good morning, Lily." "Good morning, Lucy," David said, his voice echoing in the vast space. They didn't look up. Have you watched a child retreat so far into themselves that you wondered if they'd ever come back? He tried again, crouching beside Lily's chair. "Daddy has meetings today, but Mrs. Patterson will take you to the park if you want." Lily's spoon paused for half a second. That was it. That was the only sign she'd heard him. David's chest tightened. 2 years ago, these same girls had run to him when he came home from work. They'd climb onto his lap during bedtime stories, their small hands patting his face while they chattered about their day. Now they moved through his house like beautiful strangers. The expensive therapist had theories. Trauma from the divorce, adjustment disorders, selective mutism. They used big words that meant nothing and charged thousands of dollars to watch his daughters sit in silence. If you've ever felt helpless watching someone you love slip away, hit that like button, because this story is about to get intense. Dr. Martinez had been the latest expert, a child psychologist who specialized in post-divorce trauma. She'd spent 6 months trying to crack the twin silence with play therapy and art projects. Children process pain differently than adults, she'd explained during their last session. Sometimes silence is their way of controlling a world that feels chaotic. But David knew chaos. He'd built his empire from chaos. Started with nothing but a business degree and a dream, turned a small construction company into Anderson Development, the largest commercial real estate firm in the Southeast. He understood hostile takeovers and million-dollar negotiations. He didn't understand why his own children looked at him like he was a stranger. The morning routine continued in predictable silence. Lucy finished her yogurt first, wiping her mouth with a cloth napkin like a tiny adult. Lily followed, pushing her bowl away with 2 bites left. They slipped from their chairs and headed toward the playroom without a word. David watched them go, their small feet silent on the marble floors. The playroom waited like a shrine to abandoned childhood. Shelves lined with toys that never got played with, books that never got read, dress-up clothes that hung untouched. His phone buzzed. A text from his assistant. Board meeting moved to 9 a.m. The Houston deal needs your signature. Business. At least that made sense. In conference rooms, David was king. People listened when he spoke. Decisions got made. Problems got solved. But here, in his own home, he was powerless. The memory hit without warning. Samantha's voice during their last fight. You can buy them anything except what they really need. You don't even see them, David. You see problems to solve. She'd been wrong about everything else, but maybe not that. His housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson, appeared in the doorway. 60 years old with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She'd been managing his household for 3 years. Efficient but cold. Perfect for his organized life. "Mr. Anderson, I need to speak with you about the cleaning service." David straightened his tie. What's wrong now? The agency is sending someone new. The previous girl quit yesterday. That made 6 cleaning ladies in 4 months. They all started eager, ready to tackle the mansion's 23 rooms. But something about the house's atmosphere drove them away. The silence wasn't just quiet, it was heavy, oppressive, like a weight pressing down on everyone who entered. Did they say why she quit? Mrs. Patterson's mouth tightened. She said the house felt sad, said it made her uncomfortable. David nodded. He understood. Sometimes he felt uncomfortable in his own home, too. The new one starts today. Tamara Hayes from Alabama. The agency says she's different, patient, good with difficult situations. Fine. Just keep her away from the girls during their morning routine. But as David headed to his home office, something nagged at him. The agency promised their newest cleaning lady was different, patient, experienced with difficult children. David didn't care about her qualifications. He just needed someone who wouldn't quit after seeing his daughter's hollow stares. He had no idea that Tamara Hayes would be the key to unlocking secrets he wasn't prepared to face. She walked into the Anderson mansion, carrying nothing but a cleaning bucket and a warmth that hadn't been felt in those halls for years. Tamara Hayes had scrubbed floors for millionaires before, but none had ever looked at her with such desperate hope. Have you ever started a job knowing your employer needed more than what you were hired to provide? This wasn't just about cleaning. This was about healing wounds so deep they'd turned children into statues. But what happens when the person hired to fix the house discovers the family inside is completely shattered? The front door of the Anderson mansion opened to reveal a woman who didn't belong in this world of marble and crystal. Tamara Hayes stood on the threshold in a simple cotton dress and worn sneakers, her cleaning supplies tucked into a canvas bag that had seen better days. But there was something about her presence, a quiet strength that seemed to push back against the house's oppressive silence. David appeared at the top of the grand staircase, his footsteps echoing as he descended. He'd expected someone older, more weathered. The woman before him couldn't be much past 30, with smooth brown skin and eyes that seemed to see everything without judgment. "Ms. Hayes," he said, extending his hand. David Anderson. Her handshake was firm but brief. "Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Anderson. I understand you have specific needs for this position." Specific needs. That was one way to put it. David had given the agency a long list of requirements: discretion, patience, ability to work around children who didn't respond to adult interaction. What he hadn't mentioned was the house's strange ability to break people's spirits. "Let me show you around," David said, leading her through the foyer. "The main areas need daily attention. The twins have their own wing, but they mostly keep to themselves." Tamara moved through the mansion with quiet efficiency, her simple cotton dress and worn sneakers a stark contrast to the imported marble and designer furniture. Every surface gleamed under her touch, but more importantly, the oppressive atmosphere seemed to lift wherever she passed. She paused at family photos lining the hallway, images of happier times when Samantha's laugh filled these rooms and the twins smiled for cameras. Her fingers didn't touch the frames, but something in her expression shifted. "Beautiful children," she said softly. "They don't speak," David said quickly. "Haven't for 2 years. Don't take it personally if they ignore you." Tamara turned to study his face. "Children don't stop talking for no reason, Mr. Anderson. They stop when they're protecting something or someone." The words hit harder than intended. David felt heat rise in his chest. Part irritation, part something else he didn't want to name. This woman had been in his house for 10 minutes, and she was already making observations his expensive therapist had missed. "I'm sure you mean well, but I don't mean anything except to clean your house," Tamara interrupted gently. "But I raised 2 children of my own. Silence isn't always about what happened. Sometimes it's about what's still happening." David's jaw tightened. "My daughters have everything they could possibly need." "I'm sure they do." Her voice held no challenge, just quiet certainty. "Physical needs are easy to meet. Emotional ones are harder." She continued the tour without waiting for his response, taking in each room with the practiced eye of someone who'd cleaned up after other people's lives for years. But David found himself watching her instead of showing her around. The way she moved with unconscious grace. How sunlight streaming through tall windows seemed drawn to her skin. The gentle sway of her hips as she walked. When had he last noticed a woman? Really noticed? Samantha had been gone for 3 years, but he'd been emotionally absent long before she left. Work consumed everything. Board meetings, development deals, the constant pressure of building an empire. But Tamara Hayes made him aware of things he'd forgotten. The way a woman's presence could change a room's energy. How attraction could hit without warning, making his pulse quicken and his thoughts scatter. Comment below if you've ever met someone who just radiated peace, someone who made you feel calmer just by being near them. They reached the twins' wing, a series of connected rooms that had once buzzed with childhood energy. Now the playroom stood like a museum exhibit, toys arranged perfectly because no one touched them. This is where they spend most of their time, David explained. Tamara stepped into the room and stood perfectly still, as if listening for something only she could hear. The silence felt different here, not just quiet but wounded. "They're watching us," she said without turning around. David followed her gaze to the doorway, where 2 small figures lingered in the shadows. Lily and Lucy stood pressed against the wall, their identical faces showing the first emotion he'd seen in weeks: curiosity. "Girls, this is Ms. Tamara. She'll be helping around the house." The twins didn't move, but their eyes never left Tamara's face. There was something different in their expressions, not the blank emptiness he'd grown accustomed to, but genuine interest. Tamara crouched down, bringing herself to their eye level. "Hi, beautiful girls. I like your matching dresses. Pink is my favorite color too." Lily's hand moved almost imperceptibly toward the hem of her pink sundress. Lucy tilted her head slightly, as if hearing music only she could detect. David held his breath. These were the biggest responses he'd seen from them in months. "I brought my cleaning things," Tamara continued conversationally, "but I think this room is already pretty clean. Maybe you could show me your favorite toys later." Neither girl answered, but they stepped forward. Just one small step, but it felt monumental. David's phone buzzed, his assistant reminding him about the Houston conference call. Business demanded his attention, but for the first time in years, he didn't want to leave his house. "I have to take this call," he told Tamara reluctantly. She nodded. "We'll be fine. Won't we, girls?" As David headed toward his office, something stirred in him that had nothing to do with gratitude and everything to do with desire. But when Tamara knelt beside the twins' hiding spot under the grand staircase and began humming an old gospel tune, both girls stepped forward. For the first time in months, they looked curious instead of afraid. The twins hadn't responded to $200 an hour therapists, but a cleaning lady's lullaby made them take their first steps toward the light. David stood frozen in his office doorway, watching a miracle unfold in his living room. Tamara sat cross-legged on the Persian rug, organizing art supplies while humming softly. The tune was simple, something from her childhood in Alabama, but it worked like magic on his daughters. Have you ever witnessed the exact moment when someone starts to heal? When you can actually see the walls coming down? That's what David saw as Lily crept closer to Tamara, her small hand reaching for a purple crayon. The playroom, usually a mausoleum of expensive toys gathering dust, transformed under Tamara's presence. She sat cross-legged on the Persian rug, sorting crayons by color while humming softly. The twins crept closer, drawn by something they'd forgotten existed: unconditional gentleness. "This purple is beautiful," Tamara said to no one in particular. "Remind me of the wildflowers that grow behind my mama's house in Alabama. They bloom every spring, covering the whole field like a purple blanket." Lucy's eyes widened slightly. Purple had always been her favorite color. "And this yellow," Tamara continued, holding up a bright crayon, "looks just like the sun on Sunday mornings. You know that kind of sun? The kind that makes everything feel possible." David's breath caught as Lucy took another step forward, then another, until she was standing close enough to touch the yellow crayon in Tamara's hand. "Would you like to hold it?" Tamara asked gently. Lucy's small fingers closed around the crayon. She didn't speak, but she sat down beside Tamara with the kind of trust David hadn't seen from his daughter in 2 years. From his position in the doorway, David found himself studying Tamara with new intensity. The way afternoon sunlight caught golden highlights in her dark hair. How she moved with unconscious grace, every gesture flowing into the next. When she reached for paper from the coffee table, her dress tightened across curves he shouldn't be noticing. But he was noticing everything about her. The gentle slope of her shoulders, the way she bit her lower lip when concentrating, how her presence seemed to fill the massive room in ways that had nothing to do with size and everything to do with energy. When had he become so hungry for warmth? For someone who moved through his house without fear or pity. Mr. Anderson? David startled. Tamara was looking at him with those knowing eyes, as if she could read his thoughts. Your conference call? She reminded him gently. Right. The call. He forced himself to step back. You have everything you need. We're perfect. Aren't we, girls? Lily had joined her sister on the rug, both twins now holding crayons like precious treasures. They still hadn't spoken, but their body language was completely different. Relaxed. Open. David retreated to his office, but concentration proved impossible. Through the glass doors, he could see Tamara with his daughters, their small world transformed by her presence. She wasn't doing anything revolutionary, just sitting with them, sharing quiet moments, treating them like whole people instead of broken puzzles to solve. The Houston deal could wait. For the first time in years, something more important was happening in his house. He found reasons to walk past the living room, checking the thermostat, getting water from the kitchen. Each time, the scene drew him like gravity. Tamara had spread paper across the coffee table, and both twins were drawing with focused concentration. That's a beautiful house, Lucy, Tamara was saying. Is that where you live? Lucy nodded, and pointed to a purple door she'd drawn on the front. And Lily, those flowers are gorgeous. Are they growing in a garden? Lily's crayon paused, and she looked directly at Tamara. For 5 full seconds, they held eye contact. Then Lily nodded too. David's chest tightened with emotions he couldn't name. Hope, gratitude, something deeper that scared him more than any business deal ever had. His phone rang again. This time he ignored it. Mr. Anderson? Mrs. Patterson appeared beside him, her expression disapproving. The Houston investors are holding. Tell them to wait. Sir, this is a $40 million deal. Tell them to wait, David repeated, his voice carrying the authority that had built his empire. Mrs. Patterson retreated, muttering under her breath about priorities and responsibilities. But David didn't care. He'd spent 2 years watching his daughters fade away. If there was a chance, even the smallest possibility, that Tamara could reach them, business could wait. Share in the comments if you've ever had to choose between success and something more important. What did you decide? By late afternoon, the twins had created an entire paper world. Houses with purple doors, gardens full of yellow flowers, families of stick figures holding hands under crayon suns. These are beautiful, Tamara said, gathering the drawings carefully. Should we show Daddy what you made? Both girls looked toward David's office with expressions he hadn't seen in 2 years. Excitement. They wanted to share something. With him. Daddy. Lily's voice cracked from disuse, barely above a whisper, but it was the most beautiful sound David had ever heard. He was across the room in 3 steps, kneeling beside his daughter as she held up her drawing. A house with stick figures. A tall man, 2 little girls, and a woman with dark hair. It's our family, Lily whispered, her voice like broken glass being carefully swept up. She drew you too? Lucy added, pointing to the woman figure. That's Miss Tamara. David's eyes met Tamara's over his daughters' heads. Something passed between them. Recognition, understanding, a connection that had nothing to do with employer and employee and everything to do with 2 adults witnessing a miracle together. But as the twins chattered softly about their drawings, David realized something that made his pulse quicken with more than parental joy. Tamara had become part of their family portrait after one day. His daughters had included her in their world when they kept everyone else, including him, locked out for 2 years. What did that mean? And why did the thought of her becoming permanent in their lives make his heart race with possibilities he wasn't ready to examine? "Time to clean up," Tamara said gently. Miss Tamara needs to finish her work. As she began gathering art supplies, David found himself memorizing details. The way she moved with efficiency born of years managing her own household. How she treated his daughter's creations with the reverence museum curators showed priceless artifacts. The twins helped without being asked, their silence now comfortable instead of oppressive. When Lucy accidentally knocked over a cup of water, she looked up with worried eyes, clearly expecting punishment. "Accidents happen, baby girl," Tamara said calmly, reaching for paper towels. "That's what cleaning supplies are for." Baby girl. Two simple words that somehow conveyed more love and acceptance than years of expensive therapy. David watched Tamara clean up the spill with the twins hovering nearby, eager to help. This was what he'd been missing. Not someone to fix his daughters, but someone to accept them exactly as they were while gently coaxing them back to themselves. As Tamara prepared to leave for the day, both twins hugged her legs, the first physical affection David had seen them show anyone besides each other. "Will you come back tomorrow?" Lily asked, her small voice growing stronger. "I'll be here," Tamara promised. Standing in his foyer, watching this woman who'd walked into their lives 12 hours ago, David felt something shift in his chest. It wasn't just gratitude. It wasn't just attraction. It was the dangerous recognition that Tamara Hayes might be exactly what his broken family needed. And that terrified him more than any hostile takeover ever had. She was supposed to be just the cleaning lady, but David found himself counting the hours until she returned. And that was a problem he didn't know how to solve. Tuesday morning brought something David's house hadn't seen in 2 years. His daughters waiting by the front door. "Is Miss Tamara coming today?" Lucy asked for the third time in 10 minutes. "Yes, sweetheart. She'll be here soon." The change in them was remarkable. They'd slept through the night without nightmares, eaten breakfast without being coaxed, even spoken to Mrs. Patterson, though only to ask about Tamara's arrival time. When the doorbell rang at exactly 9 a.m., both girls rushed to answer it. David followed, telling himself he was supervising his children and not eager to see Tamara again. But when the door opened and she smiled at his daughters, that warm, genuine expression that lit up her entire face, David felt his carefully constructed walls begin to crack. "Good morning, my beautiful girls," Tamara said, kneeling to hug them both. "Did you sleep well?" "We dreamed about the purple flowers," Lily announced. "And the yellow sun," Lucy added. Over their heads, Tamara's eyes met David's. "Good morning, Mr. Anderson." "David," he corrected without thinking. "Just David." Something flickered in her expression. Surprise, maybe awareness. "David," she repeated softly, and the sound of his name in her voice did things to his chest that had nothing to do with business. "Have you ever heard your name spoken like a promise? Like something worth remembering?" That's how Tamara made everything sound important, valuable, worth her full attention. The morning developed its own rhythm. David worked in his office while Tamara moved through the house, but he found himself tracking her location by sound, the soft humming that followed her everywhere. The twins' laughter drifting from whatever room she occupied. Laughter in his house. After 2 years of silence. By 10 a.m., he checked on them 4 times under various pretenses. Adjusting the air conditioning. Looking for important documents. Making sure they had everything they needed. Really, he was looking for excuses to watch Tamara work. She moved through his house like she belonged there, bringing life to spaces that had felt dead for years. When she cleaned the windows in the living room, afternoon light streamed through glass that hadn't been truly cleaned since Samantha left. When she reorganized the bookshelf, she created small reading nooks where the twins could curl up with picture books. But it was the little things that got to him. How she folded his shirts with the same care she showed everything else. The way she arranged fresh flowers from his garden in unexpected places. How she treated his house not like a job site, but like a home worth caring for. "Daddy, look," Lily's voice called from the kitchen. David found Tamara teaching his daughters to make sandwiches for lunch. Real cooking, with ingredients from his pantry that had been gathering dust. "Miss Tamara says we can make our own lunch every day," Lucy explained, carefully spreading peanut butter on bread. Independence is important, Tamara said, meeting David's eyes over the twins' heads. Children need to know they can take care of themselves. The comment felt loaded with meaning he couldn't quite grasp. But watching his daughters beam with pride over their crooked sandwiches, David understood that Tamara was teaching them more than meal preparation. She was giving them back their confidence. Would you like one? Lily offered, holding up a sandwich that was mostly peanut butter and good intentions. David's throat tightened. When was the last time his daughter had offered him anything? I'd love it. He ate every bite, even the parts where jelly had soaked through the bread. It was the best meal he'd had in years. Share a heart in the comments if you remember the first thing you learned to cook. Who taught you? What did it mean to feel capable in the kitchen? After lunch, while the twins played in their room, David found Tamara in his study, dusting his desk with the same careful attention she showed everything else. You don't have to clean in here while I'm working, he said. She looked up from organizing his papers. Am I disturbing you? Yes, he wanted to say, but not the way she meant. She was disturbing his equilibrium, his carefully controlled world, his ability to think about anything except how right she looked in his space. No, he said instead. I just meant, you've already done so much today. Your daughters needed lunch and attention. Houses need maintenance. It's all connected. She moved around his desk to dust the bookshelf, bringing her close enough that he could smell her perfume. Something light and warm that reminded him of summer evenings and possibilities he'd forgotten existed. When she reached for a book on the high shelf, her dress rode up slightly, revealing the curve of her calf. David found himself staring at the smooth line of her leg, imagining how her skin would feel under his hands. The thought hit him like electricity, raw, immediate desire that had nothing to do with gratitude and everything to do with the fact that Tamara Hayes was a beautiful woman who'd somehow become essential to his world in 24 hours. Mr. Anderson? David. He realized she was speaking to him, holding a framed photo she'd found behind the books. It was him and Samantha at some charity gala, both of them dressed in evening wear and smiling for cameras. I'm sorry, Tamara said quickly. I didn't mean to pry. It's fine. David took the photo, studying faces that felt like strangers. Had he and Samantha ever looked genuinely happy? Or had it all been performance? She's beautiful, Tamara said quietly. She was. David set the frame aside. Beauty isn't everything. No, Tamara agreed. But it's not nothing either. The comment hung between them, loaded with implications David didn't want to examine. Was she talking about Samantha? About herself? About the way he'd been looking at her all morning like a man, starved for something he couldn't name? His phone rang, breaking the tension. His assistant with questions about the Miami project. As David took the call, Tamara continued cleaning around him, moving with quiet efficiency that somehow felt intimate. When he hung up, she was gone. But her presence lingered in the straightened papers, the dust-free surfaces, the lingering scent of her perfume. David found her in the twins' room, sitting on the floor while they showed her their favorite books. The three of them looked like a family portrait, natural, comfortable, complete in a way his real family photos had never achieved. Daddy, Miss Tamara says she'll read to us tonight if you say it's okay, Lucy announced. Bedtime stories. Another thing that had died with Samantha's departure. David used to love reading to his daughters, creating voices for different characters, watching their eyes grow wide at exciting parts. If Miss Tamara has time, he said carefully. I have time, Tamara said, her voice soft. As evening approached and Tamara prepared to leave, David realized he didn't want her to go. Not because of what she did for his daughters, though that was revolutionary, but because her presence made his house feel like home again. Standing in his foyer, watching her gather her things, David made a decision that would change everything. Tamara, he said, her name feeling natural on his lips. Would you consider staying for dinner? The girls would love it, and he paused, meeting her eyes. I'd like the company. The invitation hung between them, loaded with possibilities neither was ready to name. But when Tamara smiled, that warm, genuine expression that made his chest tight, David knew he was crossing a line he couldn't uncross. I'd like that, she said simply. And just like that, the cleaning lady became something more. One dinner invitation changed everything. But neither David nor Tamara was prepared for how quickly their carefully maintained boundaries would disappear. The Anderson dining room had seen plenty of business dinners, power lunches with investors, formal meals where conversation followed strict protocols and every word carried weight. But tonight felt different. Tonight, Tamara sat at his table not as an employee, but as a guest. The twins flanked her on both sides, chattering away like they'd found their voices again. "Miss Tamara, do you have little girls too?" Lucy asked, cutting her chicken with concentration. "I have 2 children," Tamara replied, "but they're bigger than you. My son Marcus is 16, and my daughter Zoe is 13. David nearly choked on his wine. 16 and 13. That meant Tamara had been younger than he'd assumed when she became a mother. Much younger. "Where are they now?" Lily wanted to know. "Back home in Alabama with their grandmother. I came to Atlanta to find better work so I could take care of them." The simple statement hit David harder than expected. This woman had left her own children to clean his house and care for his daughters. Sacrifice layered on sacrifice, all to provide for her family. "Do you miss them?" Lucy asked with the directness only children possessed. Tamara's smile faltered for just a moment. "Every single day. But sometimes mamas have to make hard choices to give their babies better lives. Have you ever had to leave someone you love to create a better future for them? Share below if you know what it's like to sacrifice your heart for someone else's dreams." David found himself studying Tamara with new intensity. A single mother who'd moved hundreds of miles from her children to clean strangers' houses. How desperate had her situation been? How strong did someone have to be to make that choice? "Why didn't they come with you?" Lily pressed. "Well," Tamara said carefully, "moving is expensive, and your daddy's house is very nice, but my children need to finish their school year with their friends." David's chest tightened. She was living apart from her children because she couldn't afford to bring them to Atlanta. Because women like her had to choose between staying with family and finding work that paid enough to survive. "Maybe they could visit," Lucy suggested innocently. "We have lots of room." "Lucy," David said gently, not wanting to put Tamara in an uncomfortable position. But Tamara smiled at his daughter with genuine warmth. "That's very sweet of you to offer. Maybe someday." The conversation moved to safer topics, favorite foods, games the twins liked, stories from Tamara's childhood in Alabama. But David couldn't stop thinking about her sacrifice. About the children hundreds of miles away who missed their mother because she was here bringing life back to his family. After dinner, the twins convinced Tamara to read bedtime stories. David lingered in the hallway, listening to her voice bring fairy tales to life with different accents and dramatic pauses. She had them laughing at the funny parts, gasping at the scary bits. When the last story ended and the twins were tucked into bed, David found Tamara in the kitchen, washing dishes despite his protest that Mrs. Patterson would handle them. "You don't have to do that," he said, moving to stand beside her at the sink. "I know," she replied, handing him a plate to dry. "But it feels good to help." They worked in comfortable silence, moving around each other in the kitchen like they'd done this dance before. David found himself hyper-aware of every accidental touch. Her fingers brushing his as she passed him dishes, her hip bumping against his arm when she reached for soap. "Your daughters are amazing," Tamara said softly. "They just needed someone to listen without trying to fix them." "Is that what I was doing? Trying to fix them?" Tamara paused, considering her words carefully. "You were trying to help. But sometimes children need to be heard more than they need to be healed." David set down the dish towel and turned to face her fully. "What about adults? Do we need to be heard too?" The question hung between them, loaded with meaning neither was ready to address directly. But something shifted in Tamara's expression, awareness, maybe recognition of the chemistry that had been building all day. "Everyone needs to be heard," she said quietly. "Then let me hear you," David said, stepping closer. "Tell me about your children, about what brought you here, about what you need." For a moment, Tamara looked like she might retreat behind professional boundaries. But then her shoulders relaxed, and she leaned against the counter with a sigh. "Marcus wants to play college football. He's good enough, but scouts don't come to small Alabama towns unless you can pay for camps and training. Zoe loves science, dreams of being a doctor. But good schools cost money we don't have. David listened to her talk about her children with the fierce pride of a mother who'd move mountains for their dreams. She spoke about working double shifts at the diner back home, about applying for jobs across 3 states, about crying in her car after dropping them off with their grandmother. I tell myself it's temporary, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, that I'll save enough to bring them here or go back to them. But temporary has a way of becoming permanent when you're barely surviving. David's chest ached with emotions he couldn't name. When was the last time someone had been this honest with him? This vulnerable? In his world, people hid their struggles, presented polished versions of their lives. But Tamara was showing him her truth. The cost of her sacrifice. The weight she carried every day. They're lucky to have you, he said. Are they? Tamara's laugh held no humor. Their mother is hundreds of miles away, cleaning other people's houses instead of helping them with homework. Their mother is working to give them opportunities they wouldn't have otherwise. That's not abandonment. That's love. Something in his voice made her look up, really look at him. Their eyes met and held, and David felt the air between them change, charged with possibility and want, and something deeper than physical attraction. He was standing close enough to count her eyelashes, close enough to smell her perfume mixed with dish soap and something uniquely her, close enough to see the exact moment when awareness shifted into something more dangerous. David, she whispered, his name a question and a warning all at once. He should step back. Should remember that she worked for him, that power dynamics made this complicated, that he was probably reading signals that weren't there. But when Tamara's tongue darted out to wet her lips, a nervous gesture that sent heat straight through him, David knew he wasn't imagining the tension crackling between them. I should go, she said, but she didn't move away. Should you? His voice came out rougher than intended. The kitchen fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of their breathing. David could see the pulse beating rapidly at the base of her throat, could feel the heat radiating from her skin. This isn't, she started, then stopped. Isn't what? Smart, professional, simple. David stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. When has anything worthwhile ever been simple? For a moment, he thought she might close the distance between them. Her eyes dropped to his mouth, and her breathing quickened. But then she pressed her palms against the counter behind her, creating space neither of them really wanted. Your daughters need stability, she said softly. They've been through enough chaos. And what about what I need? The words escaped before he could stop them. Tamara's eyes widened slightly. What do you need, David? The question hung between them, heavy with possibility. What did he need? Someone who saw him as more than a wallet or a business opportunity. Someone who brought warmth to his cold house. Someone who made him remember what it felt like to want something beyond the next deal. Someone exactly like her. But before he could answer, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Mrs. Patterson appeared in the kitchen doorway, her expression disapproving as she took in the scene. David and Tamara standing close enough to touch, the air between them thick with unspoken desires. Mr. Anderson, you have a call from Tokyo. They said it was urgent. The spell broke. David stepped back, running a hand through his hair. Right? Tokyo. Tamara moved past him toward the kitchen island, putting distance between them that felt like miles. I should head home anyway. Early morning tomorrow. As she gathered her purse, David wanted to say something. Anything to recapture the moment they'd almost shared. But with Mrs. Patterson watching like a hawk and business demanding his attention, the opportunity slipped away. Same time tomorrow? Tamara asked, her voice carefully professional. Yes, David said, wishing he could say so much more. After she left, David stood in his empty kitchen, still smelling her perfume in the air. The Tokyo call could wait 5 more minutes. Hell, it could wait all night. Because for the first time in years, David Anderson had found something more important than business. The problem was figuring out what to do about it. Comment below if you've ever felt that moment when everything changes. When you realize you're falling for someone who could complicate your entire world. What did you do next? As he finally headed to his office to take the call, one thought echoed in David's mind. Tomorrow couldn't come fast enough. But he had no idea that tomorrow would bring revelations that would test everything he thought he knew about the woman who was rapidly becoming essential to his world. She showed up at his door, soaked from the rain, not for charity or business, but because for the first time in her life, she wanted something just for herself. The storm hit Atlanta without warning Wednesday night. David stood in his home office watching lightning split the sky when his doorbell rang at 11 p.m. No one visited the Anderson mansion after business hours. Ever. Through the security monitor, he saw Tamara followed her son into the hallway, leaving David with Zoe and Mrs. Hayes in what felt like the most awkward silence of his life. "So," Zoe said, settling into the chair beside his, "you're rich." "Zoe," Mrs. Hayes scolded. "What?" "Look at his watch, Grandma. That thing costs more than our car." David found himself almost smiling despite the tension. "Your mom said you were direct. She talks about us all the time. She's very proud of you both." Zoe studied him with eyes identical to her mother's. "Are you the reason she moved to Atlanta?" "No. She moved to Atlanta to build a better life for you and Marcus. I'm just lucky she did." In the hallway, David could hear Marcus's voice, urgent and protective. "Mama, who is this guy really? And don't say he's just a friend, because friends don't look at you the way he looks at you." David's chest tightened. He was being evaluated by a 16-year-old who'd been the man of his family since his father left. This conversation would determine whether he had a future with Tamara or not. "He's good to me." Tamara's voice carried through the partially opened door. "That's not what I asked. Are you dating your boss?" A pause. Then, "It's complicated, Marcus." "It's not complicated, Mama. Either he treats you like an equal or he treats you like help. Which is it?" David wanted to answer that question himself, but he had to let Tamara speak for their relationship, had to trust that she believed in what they were building together. "He treats me like I matter," she said finally. "Like my thoughts and feelings and dreams are important. Like I deserve to be happy." "And do you?" "Deserve to be happy." Another pause. Longer this time. "I'm starting to think maybe I do." When they returned to the room, Marcus's expression was carefully neutral. But he held out his hand to David, not friendly but not hostile either. "Nice to meet you, sir." "Nice to meet you too. Your mother talks about you all the time. Says you're going to play college football." "Yes, sir. If I can stay conscious long enough." The joke broke some of the tension in the room. Even Mrs. Hayes cracked a smile. Over the next few hours, David got a crash course in Hayes family dynamics. Zoe peppering him with questions about everything from his business to his favorite books. Marcus watching him with protective suspicion that gradually softened into cautious acceptance. Mrs. Hayes offering him coffee and homemade cookies while studying him like a specimen under a microscope. But it was the small moments that mattered most. When Zoe fell asleep in the uncomfortable chair and David quietly arranged his jacket around her shoulders. When he helped Mrs. Hayes navigate the hospital's confusing directions to the cafeteria. When he sat with Marcus during Tamara's brief nap and listened to the teenager talk about his dreams of playing Division I football. "She sacrificed everything for us, you know," Marcus said quietly, watching his mother sleep curled up in the recliner beside his bed. "I know. She deserves someone who sees how amazing she is." "She does." Marcus met his eyes directly. "Do you see how amazing she is?" David didn't hesitate. "She's the strongest person I've ever met. And the kindest. She changed my daughter's lives in 2 days and mine in less than a week." "Good answer." Marcus leaned back against his pillows. "Mama's been alone a long time, taking care of everyone but herself. Maybe it's time someone took care of her for a change." When morning came and Marcus was clear to go home, the hospital discharged him into a changed family dynamic. David had somehow become part of their unit. Not an outsider looking in, but someone who belonged in their circle of concern and care. As they prepared to leave, Zoe tugged on David's sleeve. "Are you coming to see us again?" "If your mother wants me to." "I think she does. And for what it's worth, I like you better than her last boyfriend." "Zoe," Tamara protested. "What?" "Mr. Johnson was boring, and he never brought cookies." David laughed. The first genuine laughter he'd felt in hours. These children were going to keep him on his toes. The drive back to Atlanta gave them time to process what had happened. Tamara dozed against the passenger window while David navigated highway traffic and his own swirling thoughts. Meeting her children had made everything real in ways he hadn't expected. These weren't abstract concepts, the kids she supported from afar. They were real teenagers with personalities and opinions and protective instincts about their mother. And they'd cautiously, carefully, let him into their circle. "Thank you," Tamara said softly as Atlanta's skyline appeared in the distance. "For what?" "For coming with me. For staying. For being so good with them. Thank you for letting me meet them. They're incredible, Tamara. You should be so proud." "I am." She reached for his hand. "They like you." "Think so." "I know so." Zoe asked if you were going to be around for Thanksgiving. David's heart jumped. Thanksgiving was 6 weeks away. Planning that far ahead meant Tamara saw a future for them. "What did you tell her?" "That it depends on whether you want to spend Thanksgiving with a loud family in a small house eating too much food." David brought her hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles. "I can't think of anywhere I'd rather be." As they entered the city limits, both of them understood that something fundamental had shifted. David had seen Tamara's real life. Messy, complicated, beautiful. And instead of running from the challenges, he'd stepped deeper into her world. The bridge between their different lives was holding. The question now was whether they were brave enough to keep building it together. When he mentioned creating a foundation focused on medical access for her community, something shifted in her chest. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked carefully. His answer wasn't just about buildings and funding. It was about legacy, future, permanence. Things she'd never dare to want. Standing on his porch, rain plastering her hair to her head, her thin jacket doing nothing against the downpour. He opened the door before the bell finished ringing. "What happened? Are you hurt?" She stood dripping on his marble floor, shivering from cold and something deeper. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have come here. She paused, wrapping her arms around herself. "I didn't know where else to go." David pulled her inside, grabbing a towel from the guest bathroom. "What's wrong?" "My landlord called tonight. Rent's going up $300 next month. I can't afford it, but I can't afford to move either. And Marcus called." Her voice cracked. "He got hurt at football practice. Nothing serious, but he needed his mama, and I'm not there." The words poured out of her like a dam breaking. Every fear, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt about leaving her children to build a better life for them. David listened, watching this strong woman finally let her walls crumble. Have you ever reached that breaking point where you couldn't carry the weight alone anymore? Share below if you know what it feels like when everything hits at once. "I keep telling myself it's temporary," she whispered, "that I'm doing this for them. But what if I'm just lying to myself? What if I'm missing their whole childhood for nothing?" David stepped closer, close enough to see tears mixing with rainwater on her cheeks. "You're not missing their childhood. You're fighting for their future. Am I? Or am I just running away from being poor by becoming someone's cleaning lady 400 miles from home?" The question hung heavy between them. David saw her clearly then, not the composed woman who transformed his household, but the scared mother questioning every choice she'd made. "Look at me," he said softly. When she raised her eyes to his, David saw vulnerability that took his breath away. This wasn't about rent or football injuries. This was about a woman who'd been carrying the world on her shoulders for so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to let someone else share the weight. "You saved my daughters," he said simply. "In 2 days, you gave them back their voices." That's not the work of someone running away. That's the work of someone who understands what children need, because she's given everything to her own. Something shifted in her expression. The desperation faded, replaced by awareness of how close they were standing, of how his hands had moved to frame her face without him realizing it, of how her breathing had changed from panicked to something else entirely. "David," she whispered, his name barely audible over the rain pounding against windows. He should have stepped back, should have offered her guest room, made appropriate employer comments about helping with her housing situation. Instead, he kissed her. The first touch of their lips was gentle, questioning. But when she responded, where her hands fisted in his shirt and pulled him closer. Gentle became desperate. Months of loneliness and attraction poured into that kiss. Her need meeting his one in a collision that changed everything. She tasted like rain and possibility, like coming home after being lost. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Tamara's eyes were wide with surprise and something else, hunger that matched his own. "This is crazy," she whispered against his mouth. "Probably," David agreed, brushing wet hair back from her face. "Do you care?" For answer, she kissed him again. Deeper this time, with the kind of passion that made him forget about power dynamics and professional boundaries. Made him forget everything except how right she felt in his arms. His penthouse gleamed with floor-to-ceiling windows, the city spread below like scattered diamonds on black velvet. But he wasn't looking at the view worth millions. He was looking at her like she was priceless. "Are you sure?" he asked, giving her one last chance to change her mind. "I haven't been sure about anything since I moved to Atlanta," she said, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. "But this feels right." David led her upstairs, neither of them speaking as they climbed toward his bedroom. The space felt different with her in it, more intimate than it had ever been, even during his marriage. Thunder crashed outside as she turned to face him, rain still dripping from her hair. But her eyes held no uncertainty now, only one in trust and something deeper he didn't dare name. "I've never," she started, then stopped. "Never what?" "Done this. Been with someone I work for. Been with someone who matters this much." The confession hit him harder than expected. She was trusting him with more than her body. She was trusting him with her heart. "You matter too," he said, the words inadequate for everything he felt. When he undressed her, it was with reverence. Each piece of wet clothing revealed skin he'd only imagined, curves that made his hands shake with need. But more than physical desire, he felt overwhelmed by gratitude that she was here, choosing this, choosing him. "Is this okay?" He whispered against her neck, needing her consent for every touch. "Yes," she breathed, arching into him. "Don't stop." What does it mean when someone treats your vulnerability as strength? When they see your surrender as courage? Tell me below if you felt that rare connection. They made love with the storm raging outside, rain against glass mixing with whispered words and soft cries. David had forgotten that intimacy could be about more than physical release, that could be about healing and hope and finding home in someone else's arms. Afterward, as she drifted to sleep against his chest, 3 words formed in his mind that terrified him more than any hostile takeover. "I love her." The realization should have sent him running. Love meant vulnerability, meant giving someone power to hurt you, meant complications his carefully ordered life couldn't handle. But watching Tamara sleep, her face peaceful for the first time since he'd met her, David knew it was too late for fear. He was already falling. By morning, she was gone. David woke to an empty bed and the lingering scent of her skin on his sheets. No note, no bouvier, just the indent of her head on his pillow and the crushing realization that she'd run from what they'd shared. Standing in a shower, letting hot water wash away her touch, David understood. The power imbalance between them was real. She depended on this job to support her children. Last night might have felt like choice to him, but to her, it could feel like obligation. The thought made him sick. When he came downstairs, Mrs. Patterson was waiting with coffee and disapproval radiating from every line of her body. "The cleaning lady called," she said, her voice arctic. "She won't be coming in today. Said she had a family emergency." David's chest tightened. Family emergency. Code for I made a mistake and can't face you. "Did she say when she'd be back?" "She didn't." Mrs. Patterson's tone suggested she hoped the answer was never. The twins appeared for breakfast, chattering about art projects they wanted to show Miss Tamara. When David had to explain that she wouldn't be coming today, their faces fell back into familiar silence. "Is she coming back?" Lucy asked, her small voice breaking. "I hope so," David said, meaning it more than any words he'd ever spoken. But as morning turned to afternoon with no word from Tamara, doubt crept in. Had he pushed too hard? Misread signals? Turned something beautiful into something that drove her away? His phone rang constantly, business calls that seemed meaningless compared to the woman-shaped hole in his house. By evening, David had made a decision that would have shocked his business associates. For the first time in 15 years, David Anderson was going to chase something he wanted instead of waiting for it to come to him. He just hoped he wasn't too late. Running was the only thing she knew how to do perfectly, until the day silence hurt more than staying. Tamara sat in her small apartment, staring at her phone like it might explode. 17 missed calls from David. 12 text messages that started gentle and grew more desperate as the day wore on. Are you okay? Please call me. We need to talk about last night. I'm worried about you. The girls are asking for you. That last one nearly broke her resolve. She could picture Lily and Lucy waiting by the door, confused about why Miss Tamara hadn't come to see them. They just found their voices again. Now she was abandoning them like everyone else in their young lives. But going back meant facing what she'd done. What they'd done. The way she'd melted in his arms like some desperate woman who'd never been touched with tenderness. Her apartment felt smaller now, the walls closer, the ceiling lower. The space hadn't changed, but she had, and now her carefully constructed world couldn't contain what she'd become. Have you ever run from something good because it scared you how much you wanted it? Drop a heart if you've been there. The memory hit without warning. David's hands in her hair, his voice whispering her name like a prayer. The way he'd looked at her afterward, like she was something precious instead of someone he employed. That was the problem. For a few hours, she'd forgotten who she was. Forgotten the distance between them that money and class had built. Forgotten that women like her didn't get fairy tale endings with men like him. The knock on her door made her jump. For a wild moment, she thought it might be David, coming to demand explanations she didn't know how to give. Instead, she found her neighbor Mrs. Chun holding a pot of soup and wearing a concerned expression. "You've been crying," the older woman observed, pushing past Tamara into the tiny living room. "I'm fine." Nobody's fine when they cry for 3 hours straight. Walls are thin, honey. Talk. Mrs. Chun had been the first person to welcome Tamara to Atlanta, showing up with homemade cookies and practical advice about bus routes and grocery stores. She was 65, widowed, and had raised 4 children on a seamstress salary. If anyone understood complicated choices, it was her. "I made a mistake," Tamara said finally. "With a man?" Heat flooded Tamara's cheeks. "How did you?" "Same look my daughter had when she fell for her boss." "What kind of mistake we talking about? The kind that breaks hearts or the kind that breaks careers?" "Both." The word came out broken. Mrs. Chun poured soup into bowls, her movements efficient and comforting. "He married, divorced, kids, twin girls, 5 years old. He treat you bad? Push you into something you didn't want?" Tamara's throat closed up. "No, that's the problem. He was perfect, gentle, like I mattered. And that scares you because men like David Anderson didn't fall for cleaning ladies from Alabama. Because fairy tales were stories people told children, not blueprints for real life. Because she had 2 children counting on her to be smart, practical, focused on their futures instead of her own impossible dreams. Because it can't last, she whispered. And when it ends, I lose everything. My job, my ability to help my kids, maybe even my self-respect. Mrs. Chun set down her spoon and studied Tamara with knowing eyes. Or maybe you lose the chance to find out what could have been. Maybe you teach your children that love isn't worth fighting for. The words hit like a slap. That's not what I'm teaching them. No, you run from the first good man to treat you right because you're scared it won't be perfect forever? What lesson is that? Tamara's phone buzzed again. Another text from David. "I'm not going anywhere. When you're ready to talk, I'll be here." The simple words made her chest ache with longing and fear in equal measure. "He's my boss," she said desperately. "The power dynamic is real," Mrs. Chin finished. "But power can be shared if both people want it. Question is, does he see you as an employee who warmed his bed, or as a woman who changed his life?" Vivid flashbacks to intimate moments contrasted with current loneliness made her stomach clench. The way David had touched her, like she was something to be cherished, not used. How he'd asked permission before every caress, making sure she wanted what was happening between them. I don't know, she admitted. Then find out. Because running from fear is just another kind of prison. That night, Tamara lay awake thinking about her children. About the phone call with Marcus where she'd heard him trying not to cry about missing her. About Zoe's quiet voice asking when Mama was coming home. She'd left them to build something better. But what if better wasn't just about money? What if it was about showing them that their mother deserved love and respect and partnership? What if running from David was exactly the wrong lesson to teach them? When was the last time you were completely honest with someone about your fears? About what you really wanted? Share your experience below. Friday morning brought rain again, and with it, an envelope slipped under her door. Not money this time, but a handwritten letter that made her sink to the floor as she read it. Tamara, I won't pretend I understand why you left, but I respect your right to choose. What happened between us was real for me. Not just the physical part, but all of it. The way you brought life back to my house. How you saw my daughters as whole people instead of problems to solve. The way you make me remember what it feels like to hope for something beyond the next business deal. I'm not asking for promises or forever. I'm just asking for honesty. If you ran because you don't want me, I'll respect that. But if you ran because you're scared of wanting it, then we're both cheating ourselves out of something that could be extraordinary. The girls miss you. I miss you. But more than that, I think you miss yourself when you're not here. You belong in our lives, Tamara. Not as an employee, but as family. I'm not going anywhere. When you're ready to stop running, I'll be waiting. David. P.S. Your job is secure regardless of what you decide about us. My daughters need you, and that matters more than my wounded pride. She read the letter 3 times, tears blurring the words. Then she looked around her empty apartment, at the pictures of Marcus and Zoe on her coffee table, at the bills stacked on her kitchen counter, at the life she'd built from necessity instead of choice. Mrs. Chun was right. Running from fear was just another kind of prison, and she was tired of being afraid. Her answer would change everything. But for the first time since leaving Alabama, Tamara knew exactly what she wanted to say. Some conversations change your life not because of what's said, but because for the first time, you stop hiding from the truth. Saturday afternoon found them sitting on a park bench in Piedmont Park, the city buzzing around them while they finally faced what had been building between them for days. Tamara had texted that morning. Can we talk? Somewhere neutral. David had been in his office when the message came through, but he dropped everything to meet her. Now, watching her twist her hand in her lap while children played nearby, he wondered if this conversation would end with goodbye. I read your letter, she said finally. And she turned to face him fully, her eyes showing a vulnerability that made his chest tight. You scare me, David. Not because you're dangerous, but because you make me want things I've never let myself imagine. Central Park spread around them in autumn glory, leaves spinning down like nature's confetti, but neither looked up. Their eyes remained locked as words they'd both hidden finally found air. What kind of things? He asked softly. A life that's about more than survival. A man who sees me as more than what I can do for him. A chance to be wanted, not just needed. David shifted closer on the bench. You are wanted. So much it keeps me awake at night. By David Anderson the man, or David Anderson, the CEO, who's grateful his cleaning lady fixed his family problems? The question cut deep because it held truth he hadn't wanted to examine. Had his feelings started with gratitude? With relief that someone had finally reached his daughters? Both, he admitted. It started with gratitude. You saved my girls, gave them back their voices. But what I feel now has nothing to do with what you've done and everything to do with who you are. And who am I? A woman who left her own children to give them better opportunities. Who sees strength in my daughters instead of problems. Who makes me laugh at dinner and think about something besides work. Who fits in my arms like you were made to be there. Tears gathered in her eyes, but she didn't look away. I've never had anyone speak to me like that. Like I matter for more than what I can provide. You matter, David said fiercely. Your dreams matter. Your fears matter. Your happiness matters just as much as everyone else's you've been putting first your whole life. When was the last time you were completely honest with someone about your fears? About what you really wanted? Share your experience below. A comfortable silence settled between them as they watched families enjoying the park. Parents pushing swings, kids feeding ducks, couples holding hands on walking paths. "Tell me about Marcus and Zoe," David said. "Really tell me. Not just the basic facts." Tamara's face lit up in a way that made David understand why she'd sacrificed so much for them. "Marcus is everything I wanted to be at 16. Confident, focused, sure of his place in the world. He's got this laugh that fills up whatever room he's in. And he's protective, always has been. When Zoe gets picked on at school, he's the first one there to defend her. And Zoe, brilliant, too smart for her own good sometimes. She reads everything. Science journals, medical textbooks, she checks out from the library. Last time we talked, she was explaining cellular mitosis like I'd understand what she was saying." David watched her face transform as she talked about her children, seeing clearly why they were worth every sacrifice she'd made. "They sound incredible. They are, which is why I can't mess this up." Her voice dropped. "What happens when you get tired of me? When a novelty of the cleaning lady wears off, and you remember you could have anyone?" The pain in her voice nearly broke his heart. "Is that really what you think? That you're some kind of novelty? Aren't I?" "David, look at our worlds. You live in a mansion worth more than my hometown. You wear suits that cost more than I make in a month. Your ex-wife probably went to private schools and charity galas. My ex-wife also left our daughters and disappeared for months at a time. Money doesn't make someone worthy of love, Tamara. Character does." She was quiet for a long moment, processing his words. "What exactly are you proposing here?" David's heart hammered against his ribs. They were approaching territory that would define everything between them. "I'm proposing we stop pretending this is just about physical attraction. That we acknowledge what's happening between us is real and worth exploring. That we take this one day at a time and see where it leads. And my job? Separate. Completely. What happens between us has nothing to do with your employment. If this doesn't work out, you still have a place in our lives because my daughters need you. But if it does work out," the question hung between them, loaded with possibilities neither dared voice fully. David reached for her hand, threading their fingers together. "If it works out, then we figure out the rest together. As equals. As partners." "Partners," she repeated softly, like the word was foreign. "You make me better, Tamara. Better as a father, better as a man. You brought my family back to life. But more than that, you make me remember what it feels like to want to come home." She squeezed his hand, anchor in the storm of emotions swirling between them. "I'm scared," she admitted. "So, am I? Terrified, actually, but I'm more scared of losing you than I am of taking this risk." As they sat in the park, hands linked, David felt something shift between them. Not resolution, exactly, but understanding. They were both jumping off cliffs, hoping the other would catch them. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay, let's see what happens. One day at a time." David brought her hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles. "The girls will be so happy you're coming back. And you." He smiled, the first genuine expression he'd worn in days. "I'm already happy you're here." As they walked back toward the parking area, hands still linked, David realized this was what hope felt like. Fragile and terrifying and absolutely worth the risk. He just prayed they were both strong enough for whatever came next. She invited him to her world not as a visitor, but as a challenge. "Prove you want me, not just what I represent." Sunday evening, Tamara's apartment buzzed with nervous energy as she prepared dinner for David. Not the Anderson mansion with its marble counters and crystal chandeliers, but her real life. Secondhand furniture, mismatched dishes, and walls thin enough to hear Mrs. Chen's television next door. She'd issued the invitation that morning, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "If you want to understand who I am, come see where I live. But David, not Mr. Anderson. Leave the CEO at home." Now, checking her reflection in the bathroom mirror, Tamara wondered if she'd lost her mind. This apartment was smaller than David's walk-in closet. What was she trying to prove? The knock on her door at exactly 6 p.m. made her pulse jump. David stood in her hallway holding a bottle of wine that probably cost more than her monthly grocery budget, but his expression held none of the polite distance she'd expected. He looked nervous, uncertain, human. "Hi," he said simply. "Hi yourself. Come in." Her apartment felt different with him in it. Smaller, yet somehow expanded, like her world was both shrinking to just the two of them and growing beyond boundaries she'd accepted. David's eyes took in everything. The second-hand couch with its carefully placed throw pillows, the kitchen table that wobbled unless you knew which corner to avoid, the photographs of Marcus and Zoe covering every available surface. "It's not much," she started, then stopped herself. "Actually, no. It's exactly enough. It's mine, and I'm proud of it." "You should be," David said, his voice holding genuine appreciation. "It feels like home." He moved through her space with careful respect, studying the photos like museum pieces. Marcus in his football uniform, grinning at the camera. Zoe at last year's science fair, holding a trophy almost as big as she was. "They look like you," he observed. "Marcus has his father's stubborn streak. Zoe got my curiosity and my mouth." Tamara smiled, relaxing slightly. "They'd probably interrogate you mercilessly if they were here. I'd like to meet them someday, if you want that." The casual comment stopped her cold. Meeting her children meant this was real. Meant David saw a future that included her whole life, not just the convenient parts. "Let's see how tonight goes first," she said, deflecting the intensity of the moment. Dinner was simple: baked chicken, rice, green beans, seasoned with bacon the way her grandmother had taught her. Nothing fancy, but everything made with care. "This is incredible," David said after his first bite. "It's just chicken. It's comfort. When's the last time I had a home-cooked meal that wasn't prepared by a chef?" Share in the comments if you remember the first home-cooked meal someone made just for you. Who cooked it? What did it mean to feel cared for that way? They talked through dinner about everything and nothing. David's childhood in middle-class suburbs before wealth changed everything. Tamara's memories of growing up with a single mother who worked double shifts but never missed a school play. "She sounds like you," David observed. "Strong, determined to give her child better than she had. She died when I was 22. Never got to meet her grandchildren." Tamara's voice caught slightly. "I think she would have liked them. Would have been proud of the choices I've made. She would have been proud of the woman you became." The simple words, spoken with such conviction, made her chest warm with emotions she'd kept buried for years. After dinner, they moved to her couch, a second-hand find she'd reupholstered herself in soft blue fabric. David seemed to fill the entire space, his presence both comforting and electric. "Can I ask you something?" Tamara said, curling her legs under her. "When you were married, were you happy?" David was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "I thought I was. But looking back, I think I was happy with the idea of being married. The status, the complete picture it presented to clients and investors." "What about Samantha? Did you love her?" "I loved who I thought she was. Beautiful, sophisticated, perfect for the life I was building. But I don't think I ever really knew her. We lived parallel lives in the same house." "Is that what you want with me? Another perfect picture?" David turned to face her fully, his expression intense. "What I want with you is the opposite of perfect. I want real, messy, complicated. I want to know what makes you laugh at 2 in the morning and what scares you when you can't sleep." "I'm not sophisticated," she said quietly. "Thank God. Sophisticated is overrated. I don't know about wine or art or how to make conversation at charity galas. I don't care about any of that. But your world can learn to include yours," David interrupted. "I'm tired of living in a bubble where everything looks perfect and feels empty." The conviction in his voice made her believe him, made her want to trust that this could work despite every logical reason it shouldn't. "What about the twins? What happens when they get attached to me and things don't work out between us?" "Then we make sure things work out." The simple statement hung between them, loaded with promises neither was ready to make, but both desperately wanted to believe. David reached for her hand, threading their fingers together like he had in the park. "I'm not asking you to be someone else, Tamara. I'm asking you to be exactly who you are. Even if who I am doesn't fit in your world, then we'll make a new world, one that fits both of us." Before she could second-guess herself, Tamara leaned forward and kissed him. Not the desperate kiss from that stormy night, but something softer, a question and an answer all at once. David responded immediately, his hands coming up to frame her face with the gentleness that had undone her from the beginning. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, the air between them had changed. "I'm not glass," she said, her voice steady despite her racing pulse. "Stop handling me like I'll break." Something shifted in David's expression, surprise giving way to heat that made her stomach clench with want. "Show me what you want," he said, his voice rougher than before. For answer, she stood and held out her hand. "Come with me." Her bedroom was tiny compared to his master's suite, dominated by a queen bed covered in quilts her grandmother had made. But when David looked around the space, his expression held nothing but appreciation for this glimpse into her real life. "Are you sure?" he asked, giving her one last chance to change her mind. "I've never been more sure of anything. What's more intimate, letting someone see your vulnerability or showing them your strength? Comment below with your thoughts." When they came together this time, it was different from that first desperate night. This was choice, not circumstance. This was Tamara claiming what she wanted instead of just accepting what was offered. She undressed him slowly, learning the landscape of his body with hands that trembled from desire instead of nerves. When he tried to take control, she pushed him back against her pillows with a smile that made his eyes darken. "My house," she whispered against his ear. "My rules." David surrendered completely, letting her set the pace and rhythm, letting her take what she needed while giving everything she wanted. When she finally took him inside her, moving with confidence that came from knowing her own worth, David looked at her like she was everything he'd ever wanted and hadn't known he was searching for. Afterward, they lay tangled in her grandmother's quilts, the sounds of the city filtering through thin walls. David traced patterns on her bare shoulder, his touch reverent. "This is better than the mansion," he said softly. "Lying in my second-hand bed, lying anywhere with you, but especially here, where you don't have to pretend to be anything but exactly who you are." As they drifted towards sleep, Tamara felt something settle in her chest. Not certainty, that would take time, but hope. Real, tangible hope that maybe fairy tales weren't just for children after all. The ringing phone at midnight shattered their peaceful bubble. Tamara answered groggily, expecting a wrong number. Instead, she heard her mother-in-law's panicked voice. "Tamara, honey, you need to come home. Right now. It's about the kids." People say love bridges different worlds, but nobody tells you how terrifying it is to stand in the middle, wondering if the bridge will hold. The emergency room in Birmingham, Alabama buzzed with controlled chaos at 3 a.m. Monday morning. Tamara sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair, David's hands steady in hers while they waited for news about Marcus. Concussion from football practice, she'd explained during the frantic drive south. He was unconscious for 2 minutes. They're keeping him overnight for observation. David had insisted on driving her to Alabama. No discussion, no hesitation. Just grabbed his keys and held her while she cried in his hallway. Now, 5 hours later, they looked like refugees from two different worlds. Tamara in jeans and a hastily grabbed sweater. David still wearing his expensive clothes from their dinner date. The contrast wasn't lost on anyone in the waiting room. Family of Marcus Hayes? A nurse appeared with a clipboard. "That's me," Tamara said, jumping up. "He's asking for you. Room 314. As they walked down the hospital corridor, David felt eyes following them. A white man in a $1,000 suit holding hands with a black cleaning lady. In Atlanta, their relationship might raise eyebrows. Here in small-town Alabama, it felt like advertising. "You don't have to come in," Tamara said softly. "If this is uncomfortable, the only thing that would be uncomfortable is leaving you to handle this alone." Marcus looked small in the hospital bed, his 16-year-old frame dwarfed by machines and monitors. But his eyes lit up when he saw his mother. "Mama." His voice was hoarse but strong. Tamara was across the room in seconds, gathering him into her arms with the fierce protectiveness of a mother who'd driven through the night to reach her child. "How do you feel, baby?" "Like somebody hit me with a truck. But I'm okay, I promise. The doctor said I can probably go home tomorrow." Over Tamara's shoulder, Marcus's eyes found David, standing awkwardly by the door. The boy's expression shifted from curiosity to something harder. "Who's that?" Tamara straightened, her hand still in her son's hair. Marcus, this is David Anderson. He's important to me. The teenager's eyes narrowed as he took in David's expensive clothes, his obvious discomfort in the hospital setting. Important how? Before Tamara could answer, the door burst open and 13-year-old Zoe rushed in, followed by an older woman David assumed was Tamara's mother-in-law. Marcus, are you okay? Grandma drove so fast. I thought we were going to die before we got here. The family reunion was immediate and loud. 3 generations of Hayes women fussing over Marcus while he protested that he was fine. David stepped back, feeling like an intruder in their private moment. But Zoe noticed him immediately, her sharp eyes taking in everything from his designer shoes to his obvious anxiety. Who are you? She asked with the directness that only 13-year-olds possessed. Zoe, manners, the grandmother chided. It's okay, David said, stepping forward. I am David. I'm a friend of your mother's. What kind of friend drives 5 hours in the middle of the night? Zoe asked, crossing her arms. Smart kid, just like her mother said. The kind who cares about her, David answered honestly. Something in his tone must have satisfied Zoe because she nodded once, then turned back to her brother. But David caught the way she kept glancing at him, curiosity warring with protectiveness. The grandmother, Mrs. Hayes, Tamara introduced her, was polite but reserved. 70 years old with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing, she shook David's hand with the kind of grip that conveyed both welcome and warning. Have you ever felt like you were living in 2 different worlds? How did you bridge that gap? Share your experience. Mama, can I talk to you outside? Marcus asked, his voice serious. Tamara. She grew up believing survival was the best she could hope for, until the day someone handed her the power to change the system that nearly broke her. 3 weeks after the Alabama hospital trip, Tamara stood in a community center conference room facing 30 neighborhood residents who looked at her with mixtures of hope and skepticism. The building smelled like old coffee and decades of struggle, but today it buzzed with possibility. This isn't charity, she told the room, her voice steady despite her racing heart. This is justice. This is what happens when we refuse to accept that some lives matter less than others. David watched from the back of the room, pride radiating from every line of his body. The David Anderson Medical Access Foundation had become real in record time. Lawyers, paperwork, funding all arranged with the efficiency that built empires. But this moment belonged to Tamara. What would you change if you suddenly had the resources to make a difference? What cause means everything to you? Share your vision below. Mrs. Rodriguez raised her hand from the 3rd row. How do we know this isn't some rich man's tax write-off that disappears when he gets bored? Fair question. Tamara had asked the same thing when David first proposed the foundation during a quiet dinner at her apartment. Because it's not his foundation, Tamara replied. It's ours. Yes, mister. Anderson provided the initial funding, but the board of directors comes from this community. The decisions get made by people who live here, work here, raise their children here. And what happens when you two break up? The question came from Mr. Jackson, whose wife had died last year because they couldn't afford her insulin. The blunt question hung in the air like smoke. Everyone knew about Tamara and David by now. Small communities didn't keep secrets, especially about cleaning ladies dating millionaires. Then the foundation continues, David said, speaking for the first time since introducing himself. The funding is permanent, legally protected. Whatever happens between Tamara and me, this work goes on. After the meeting, as folding chairs were stacked and coffee cups collected, David found Tamara organizing papers with a focused intensity he'd learned meant she was processing big emotions. You were incredible up there, he said softly. Was I? Because I felt like I was drowning. You looked like someone born to lead. She turned to face him fully, and David saw something new in her expression. Not just gratitude or affection, but partnership. Equal footing in a way that made his chest warm with feelings he was still learning to name. This is really happening, she said. Mobile clinics, prescription assistance, preventive care programs. All of it. They'd spent weeks planning together, David contributing business expertise, while Tamara provided community insight. Late nights at her kitchen table, laptops open between cups of coffee, building something that could change lives. "There's something I want to show you," David said, pulling out his phone. The architectural plans came in today. The screen showed renderings of a modern medical facility. Clean lines, lots of windows, designed to feel welcoming rather than institutional. "The Viola Hayes Community Health Center," he said, watching her face. Tamara's eyes filled with tears. "You named it after my mother. She raised the woman who's going to transform healthcare in this community." Seemed fitting. Before she could respond, David's phone rang. His assistant with news that couldn't wait. The Miami development deal needed his signature tonight, worth $40 million in profits. Business calling again. But this time, David looked at the phone and made a choice that would have shocked his younger self. "Tell them it'll have to wait until tomorrow. I have more important things to do tonight." The drive back to David's house was quiet, both of them processing the evening's magnitude. But when they pulled into his driveway, Tamara noticed something that made her stomach clench with worry. Every light in the house was on. Mrs. Patterson's car sat in the circular drive along with a police cruiser. David was out of the car before the engine stopped, Tamara close behind. They found Mrs. Patterson in the foyer, her usual composed demeanor cracked with distress. "Thank God you're back," she said. "The girls, something happened." "Where are they?" David demanded. "Upstairs with Officer Martinez." "They're not hurt," she added quickly. "But David, they're speaking. Really speaking. About everything." David took the stairs 3 at a time, Tamara right behind him. They found the twins in their playroom with a female police officer who looked up as they entered. "Mr. Anderson?" "Officer Martinez. Your daughters asked to speak with someone about their mother." Lily and Lucy sat close together on their play rug, no longer the silent ghosts who'd haunted the mansion for 2 years. Their faces showed a mix of fear and relief that made David's chest tighten. "Daddy," Lily said, her voice stronger than he'd heard it since Samantha left. "We need to tell you about Mommy." David knelt before his daughters, heart hammering against his ribs. "What about Mommy, sweetheart?" "She told us not to tell," Lucy whispered. "Said bad things would happen if we talked about the secret." "What secret?" The twins looked at each other, then at Tamara, who'd remained by the door. Some silent communication passed between them before Lily spoke. "Mommy hurt us sometimes. When she got really mad, she said if we told anyone, they'd take us away from you and we'd never see you again." The words hit David like physical blows. Images flashed through his mind. Samantha's quick temper, her impatience with the twins' normal 5-year-old behavior, the way she'd lock herself in the bedroom for hours after disciplining them. "She said talking was dangerous," Lucy added. "So we stopped. To keep safe. To stay with you." Officer Martinez leaned forward gently. "Can you tell us what kind of hurting, girls?" The story came out in pieces. Samantha's escalating punishments for minor infractions. Being locked in closets. Having meals withheld. The final incident that silenced them. Samantha threatening to abandon them in a parking lot if they ever told anyone about her discipline methods. David felt sick. His daughters had lived in terror for months before Samantha left, then continued that terror in silence for 2 years after. They protected him by destroying themselves. "Why are you telling us now?" David asked, his voice barely functional. Lily pointed at Tamara. "Miss Tamara said families don't hurt each other. That mommies and daddies are supposed to keep children safe, not scared. She said if someone hurts you, telling isn't dangerous," Lucy added. "It's how you stop the hurting." David's eyes met Tamara's across the room, seeing his own anguish reflected in her face. She'd done more than give his daughters their voices back. She'd taught them the difference between love and fear. After Officer Martinez left with her report and the twins were finally asleep, David sat in his study, staring at family photos that now felt like evidence of his failure. How had he missed the signs? How had he been so focused on business success that he'd failed to protect his own children? Tamara found him there at midnight, still motionless in his chair. "It's not your fault," she said quietly. "Isn't it? I was their father. I should have known. Abusers are experts at hiding their behavior. And you were working 16-hour days, traveling constantly. You couldn't see what she didn't want you to see." David's laugh held no humor. Some father I am. My daughters lived in hell while I was closing deals. Tamara moved behind his chair, her hands gentle on his shoulders. Your daughters survived because they knew you loved them. That love kept them strong enough to endure, strong enough to finally speak. They protected me by sacrificing themselves. And now you get to protect them by getting them the help they need, by being the father they deserve, by showing them that their voices matter. The simple words broke something open in David's chest. Tears he'd been holding back for hours finally came. Great shaking sobs of grief and rage and overwhelming love for the little girls who'd suffered in silence to stay with him. Tamara held him while he cried, her strength anchoring him through the storm. When the tears finally stopped, David understood something fundamental had changed. Not just about his relationship with his daughters, but about what kind of man he wanted to be. I need to make some changes, he said quietly. What kind of changes? Work less. Be present more. Actually be their father instead of just their provider. Tamara pressed a soft kiss to the top of his head. They're going to need therapy. Time. Patience. They'll have all of it. Whatever they need. As they headed upstairs together, David realized the foundation they were building wasn't just about community health care. It was about creating safety. For his daughters, for Tamara's children, for every family that had ever faced impossible choices between survival and happiness. The newspaper headline seemed innocent enough. CEO's new project and new love, but the details inside about her background made her blood run cold. Someone had talked, exposing everything she kept private, including the original surrogacy contract. The world loves to tear down what it doesn't understand. A street girl with a rich man, a powerful CEO with a nobody from Brooklyn. But what they didn't know was that judgment only made them hold on tighter. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution landed on David's driveway Thursday morning like a bomb disguised as newsprint. The headline read, Anderson Foundation, Charity or Romance? Below it, a photo of David and Tamara leaving the community center, hands linked, faces serious with purpose. The article was worse than the headline suggested. Sources close to Anderson Development reveal that CEO David Anderson's latest philanthropic venture coincides suspiciously with his relationship with former housekeeper Tamara Hayes. Hayes, 32, moved to Atlanta from Alabama earlier this year, reportedly seeking work after financial difficulties forced her to consider surrogate pregnancy to pay bills. The question many are asking, is the David Anderson Medical Access Foundation legitimate community outreach, or an expensive way to impress a girlfriend from the wrong side of the tracks? David read the article 3 times before the words fully sank in. Someone had leaked Tamara's most private struggles, her desperate application to the surrogacy clinic, her financial desperation. The very vulnerabilities she'd trusted him with had been weaponized against them both. His phone started ringing at 7 a.m. Board members, investors, reporters wanting statements. Mrs. Patterson fielded calls with increasing irritation while David tried to reach Tamara. Her phone went straight to voicemail. By 9 a.m., news vans lined the street outside his house. By 10, they'd found Tamara's apartment building. Camera flashes exploded like lightning as they walked from the car to the hospital entrance for the twins' first therapy appointment. Reporters shouting questions that reduced their story to scandal and sensation. Mr. Anderson, is it true you met Ms. Hayes when she applied to carry your child? Tamara, how does it feel to go from cleaning houses to running a foundation? Is this relationship genuine or financially motivated? David placed his hand on the small of her back, not to guide her, but to ground himself. Tamara walked with her chin up, ignoring the chaos around them. But he could feel the tension radiating through her body. Dr. Sarah Chun, the child psychologist they'd selected for the twins, waited in her office with warm smiles and age-appropriate books. But even here, the morning's invasion followed them. I'm sorry you're dealing with media attention, Dr. Chun said gently. It can't be easy. It's not about us, Tamara said firmly. It's about helping Lily and Lucy heal. The session went better than expected. The twins, freed from their burden of secrets, talked openly about nightmares and fears. Dr. Chun explained trauma responses, gave them tools for managing anxiety, helped them understand that their mother's behavior hadn't been their fault. They're remarkably resilient, she told David and Tamara afterward. With consistent support and therapy, they'll be fine. Children are amazingly good at healing when they feel safe. But safety felt relative when they left the building to find twice as many reporters waiting. The questions got uglier, more personal. Tamara, did you target David Anderson specifically because of his wealth? Mr. Anderson, do you think it's appropriate to date employees? Is this foundation just guilt money? That last question stopped Tamara cold. She turned to face the reporter, a sharp-faced woman with calculating eyes and a voice trained to cut. You think this is about money? Tamara's voice carried across the parking lot. Money doesn't build foundations. Money doesn't heal communities. People do that. People who understand what it means to fight for dignity. But isn't it convenient that your personal relationship coincides with professional advancement? David started to intervene, but Tamara held up her hand. This was her fight. Let me tell you what's convenient, she said, her voice steady despite the cameras rolling. It's convenient to have health insurance when your child gets hurt. It's convenient to afford prescription medications. It's convenient to get preventive care instead of waiting until emergencies force you to choose between medical bills and rent. The reporter pressed harder. Sources say you applied for surrogacy work before meeting Mr. Anderson. Were you looking for wealthy men to exploit? I was looking for ways to keep my children alive and healthy, Tamara replied without flinching. If that makes me an opportunist, then every parent in America is guilty of the same crime. Have you ever been judged or misunderstood for your relationship? How did you handle it? Share your story in the comments. The drive home was silent except for talk radio hosts already dissecting the morning's drama. Some defended their relationship, others questioned the power dynamics. Everyone had opinions about people they'd never met. I'm sorry, David said as they pulled into his garage, away from cameras and shouting questions. For what? For not protecting you from this. For not anticipating it. Tamara turned in her seat to face him. David, look at me. I knew this could happen. Rich man, poor woman. It's a story people love to pick apart. But I'm not ashamed of where I come from or how we met. Even though they're making you look like a gold digger, let them. The people who matter know better. That afternoon brought more challenges. David's business partners called emergency meetings. 3 board members demanded explanations about his relationship with staff. Stock prices dropped 2 points on rumors of instability in leadership. Mrs. Patterson announced her resignation. This isn't the kind of household I can work in anymore, she said primly, as if Tamara's presence had somehow corrupted the mansion's moral fiber. But for every voice of disapproval, others rose in support. Community leaders who'd attended the foundation meetings spoke to reporters about Tamara's genuine commitment. Marcus called from Alabama to say he was proud of his mother for standing up to bullies. Zoe started a social media campaign defending her mother's character. The twins, surprisingly, seemed least affected by the chaos. Are people mad at Miss Tamara? Lucy asked during dinner. Some people are confused about our family, David explained carefully. They don't understand that families can look different and still be full of love. Will Miss Tamara have to go away? Lily's voice held the fear that still haunted her, that people she loved would disappear. Not unless she wants to, David promised. And even then, we'd make sure she could visit whenever she wanted. After the twins were in bed, David found Tamara in his study, reading community health statistics by lamplight. She looked up when he entered, and something in her expression made his chest warm despite the day's chaos. The hospital suggested experimental treatment for your mother, she said quietly, before we met. The cost was staggering. I was going to find a way to pay for it myself. David sat beside her on the leather couch. Why are you telling me this now? Because today proved something I wasn't sure about before. She reached for his hand, threading their fingers together. We'll find solutions together. This time, I'm not afraid to accept help. The words hung between them, simple but revolutionary. Partnership instead of dependence. Equality instead of charity. What changed your mind? Watching you today. You didn't try to shield me from reporters or speak for me. You trusted me to handle myself. That's not how employers treat employees. That's how partners treat each other. David brought her hand to his lips, pressing soft kisses to her knuckles. Partners, he repeated, liking the sound. Partners, she confirmed. In everything. Outside, news vans still lined the street, and social media buzzed with speculation about their relationship. But inside his house, surrounded by the quiet sounds of family settling into evening routines, David felt more certain than ever that some things were worth fighting for. When the doctor suggested experimental treatment for her mother, the cost was staggering. Before he could offer, she reached for his hand. "We'll find it together," she said. "This time, I'm not afraid to accept help." The words hung between them, simple but revolutionary. 1 year ago, she stood in a clinic ready to sell her body to save her mother. Today, she stood on a stage ready to change a system that forced women like her to make impossible choices. The ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Viola Hayes Community Health Center took place on a crisp October morning that felt like possibility itself. The building, now the Viola Hayes Center for Health Equity, gleamed in the morning sun, its brick facade and new windows a testament to what happens when resources meet vision, when privilege meets purpose. Tamara stood at the podium, looking out at faces she'd known her entire life. Mrs. Rodriguez from the grocery store, Mr. Jackson, whose wife's memory had inspired the diabetes prevention program, teenagers from the local high school who'd volunteered to help with patient navigation. And in the front row, David sat with Lily and Lucy, their faces glowing with pride as they watched the woman who'd become essential to their world claim her place as a community leader. 12 months ago, I stood in a medical office ready to make a choice no woman should have to make, Tamara began, her voice carrying clearly through the crowd. I was prepared to sacrifice my body to afford my mother's medical care. Today, we open a facility that ensures no family in our community will face that choice again. The crowd erupted in applause, but Tamara held up her hand for quiet. This center isn't just about providing health care. It's about restoring dignity. About saying that every life has value regardless of zip code or bank account. About refusing to accept a system that profits from desperation. David watched her speak with the same awe he'd felt the first day she'd walked into his house. But this was different. This wasn't the quiet woman who'd cleaned his windows and healed his children. This was a leader, comfortable in her own power, unafraid to demand justice. Behind him, he heard reporters typing furiously on phones and tablets. The media attention had shifted over the past few months. Initial skepticism about their relationship had given way to grudging respect as the foundation's work produced real results. Mobile clinics serving rural areas. Prescription assistance programs that had already helped hundreds of families. Mental health services for children who'd never had access to therapy. The numbers didn't lie, even when cynics wanted them to. We're not just opening a building today, Tamara continued. We're opening doorways to possibility, to hope, to the radical idea that healthcare is a human right, not a privilege to be earned. When she finished speaking, the applause was thunderous. David stood with everyone else, clapping until his hands hurt, watching his partner, because that's what she was now in every sense of the word, accept congratulations from community members whose lives she was changing. The ribbon-cutting moment was perfect. Tamara's mother would have loved seeing her daughter honored this way. Mrs. Hayes had flown in from Alabama for the ceremony, her pride evident as she watched her daughter-in-law claim her place in the world. Marcus and Zoe flanked their grandmother, both teenagers grinning as cameras captured their family's triumph. Marcus wore his leather jacket from his high school football team. Zoe carried a bouquet of flowers she'd insisted on bringing for her mother. If someone told you that love wasn't about rescue but recognition, would you believe them? If they said dignity matters more than desire, would you understand? Share what true partnership means to you. After the ceremony, as the crowd mingled over coffee and cake, David found himself in conversation with Dr. Martinez, the pediatrician who'd agreed to run the children's clinic. "This is remarkable work," she said, gesturing toward the modern equipment and welcoming spaces. "But I have to ask, What happens if you and Tamara don't work out? Will the funding continue? It was a question David had heard dozens of times over the past months, always with the same underlying assumption that his support for the foundation was conditional on his relationship with Tamara. Doctor, he said patiently, the foundation has its own endowment, its own board of directors, its own mission that exists independently of my personal life. If Tamara and I broke up tomorrow, which we won't, the work would continue. And if something happened to you, then my estate includes provisions for the foundation's permanent funding. This isn't charity that depends on one person's goodwill. This is systemic change designed to outlast all of us. Dr. Martinez nodded, satisfied. But the conversation reminded David of how many people still saw their work through the lens of romance rather than recognizing it as the serious social justice project it had become. Later that afternoon, as the last visitors toured the facility, David found Tamara in the children's play area, arranging books on low shelves designed for small hands. "How does it feel?" he asked, settling beside her on a tiny chair that made his knees nearly touch his chin. "Overwhelming. Wonderful. Terrifying." She laughed, that musical sound that at first made him notice her as more than his housekeeper. "A year ago, I was cleaning other people's houses. Now I'm running a health center. You were always capable of this. You just needed the opportunity, and a partner who believed I deserved it." David reached for her hand, marveling at how natural the gesture had become. "We make a good team. The best." She squeezed his fingers. "Speaking of teams, I have something to tell you." Something in her tone made him look up from the children's books. Tamara's expression held excitement and nervousness in equal measure. "What is it?" Before she could answer, the twins burst through the doorway with Zoe and Marcus close behind, all four children chattering about the playground they discovered behind the building. "Miss Tamara, can we come here when we're sick?" Lucy asked, climbing onto Tamara's lap with the casual affection that had developed over months of family dinners and bedtime stories. "Of course, sweetheart. This is your health center, too. Will you still live with us?" Lily wanted to know. The question hung in the air, loaded with implications none of the adults had discussed directly. Over the past few months, Tamara had been spending more nights at David's house than her own apartment. Her things had gradually migrated to his bedroom. The twins had started calling her by name instead of Miss Tamara, but they'd never made it official. "Would you like that?" Tamara asked gently. "Yes," both twins said simultaneously. Marcus and Zoe exchanged glances, the kind of sibling communication that didn't require words. Then Zoe spoke for both of them. "We think you should marry him, Mom." The blunt announcement from her 13-year-old daughter made Tamara's cheeks flush pink. David felt his heart skip several beats. "Zoe," Tamara protested. "What? You love him. He loves you. You're already a family anyway. Might as well make it official." From the mouths of teenagers, David found himself grinning despite the awkwardness of the moment. Out of the mouths of babes, he murmured. As they locked up the building together, the October sunset painting everything golden, David stopped suddenly, hand in his pocket. "There's something I've been waiting to ask you," he said, and for once, she wasn't afraid of what came next. She once believed love was a luxury she couldn't afford, until the day the richest man she knew offered her the only thing that mattered: choice. The rooftop garden of their brownstone spread out under the stars, string lights creating a canopy of soft gold against the Brooklyn skyline. David had spent weeks planning this moment, but now, with Tamara beside him and the ring box heavy in his pocket, every rehearsed word disappeared. They'd bought the brownstone together 3 months after the health center opened. A compromise between his mansion and her tiny apartment, elegant but warm, spacious but homey. The twins each had their own rooms. Marcus and Zoe had spaces for weekend visits that were becoming more frequent as college plans took shape. "Remember when you said you'd never been on a rooftop garden?" David asked, his voice rougher than intended. Tamara smiled, settling closer to him on the bench they'd installed between herb planters. First time for everything. She wore the blue dress she'd chosen for their first official date, the one that brought out her eyes and made his chest tight with feelings he'd finally learned to name. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, and she looked more beautiful than any woman had a right to look while completely destroying his ability to think clearly. Tamara, he began, then stopped, pulling the small velvet box from his pocket. Her eyes widened as he dropped to one knee beside the bench, the city lights twinkling below them like scattered diamonds. I had this whole speech planned, he said, opening the box to reveal a simple solitaire that caught starlight and threw it back in brilliant sparks. About how you changed my life, saved my daughters, made me remember what home feels like. David, let me finish, he said gently, because this isn't just about what you've given me. It's about what we've built together. The foundation, our family, this life that neither of us could have created alone. The ring in his hand wasn't just platinum and diamonds. It was a question about forever, about choosing each other every day, about building something that would outlast them both. I'm not asking you to be mine, he said, his voice steady despite his hammering heart. I'm asking if we can be each other's, equal partners, building something neither of us could create alone. Tears gathered in her eyes, but her smile was radiant. What exactly are you asking, David Anderson? I'm asking if you'll marry me. Not because you need me or I need you, but because we choose each other. Every day, for all the days we have left. The question hung between them, heavy with possibility and hope and the kind of love that had grown slowly, built on respect and partnership and shared dreams for the future. What would your answer be to a proposal that honors your independence while offering partnership? Tell me in the comments what your ideal commitment looks like. Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes, of course, yes. David slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then pulled her into his arms for a kiss that tasted like tears and laughter and promises they both intended to keep. I love you, he said against her mouth. I love your strength and your stubbornness and the way you make everything better just by being in it. I love you too, she replied, her voice thick with emotion. I love how you see me, really see me, not just what I can do for you. They held each other as the city sparkled below, both understanding that this moment was an ending and a beginning. The end of two separate lives, lived in careful isolation. The beginning of something bigger than both of them. The kids are going to lose their minds, Tamara laughed, wiping tears from her cheeks. Zoe's going to say she called it. Marcus is going to want to give you another protective big brother speech. The twins are going to insist on being flower girls. Oh God, we're really doing this, aren't we? Planning a wedding. David grinned, that boyish expression that at first made her heart skip beats. We're really doing this. Together. Later, curled up in their bed, because it was theirs now officially and completely. They made love with the slow reverence of people who knew they had all the time in the world to learn each other's bodies, hearts, dreams. This body that was once offered as sacrifice now creates life by choice, she whispered against his chest afterward. The ultimate testament to what happens when love sees dignity instead of desperation. What do you mean? David asked, though something in her tone made his pulse quicken. Tamara took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach, where life they'd created by choice, not contract, stirred beneath her skin. This is what happens when sacrifice becomes celebration. The words hit him like lightning. Are you? 8 weeks. I found out yesterday, right before the ceremony. I was going to tell you at the health center, but then Zoe announced our engagement plans, and the moment got away from me. David stared at her in wonder, his hand warm against the place where their child was growing. We're having a baby. We're having a baby. Joy flooded through him so completely he couldn't speak. Another child. A baby created from love instead of obligation. Wanted by both parents, welcomed into a family that had been built on choice and respect and partnership. Are you happy? Tamara asked, sudden uncertainty coloring her voice. For answer, David kissed her with reverence that had deepened, not diminished with time, each touch a reminder that her body had never been a transaction, but always a temple, worthy of worship even before he recognized its worth. As they drifted towards sleep, engagement ring catching moonlight from the window, David realized this was what contentment felt like. Not the desperate hunger that had driven his business success, but quiet satisfaction with a life built on love instead of achievement. Tomorrow they'd call the kids, plan a wedding, start preparing for the baby that would complete their unconventional family. But tonight, they simply held each other and marveled at how far they'd traveled from that first day when she'd walked into his house, carrying nothing but cleaning supplies and the strength to heal what seemed beyond repair. As she slipped the ring onto her finger, a thought struck her with such clarity it took her breath away. This wasn't just about them anymore. There was something she needed to tell him, something that would change everything again. The body she once offered as sacrifice now created life by choice. The ultimate testament to what happens when love sees dignity instead of desperation. 6 months later, the nursery walls glowed soft yellow in the morning light, hand-painted constellations spanning the ceiling. Not just stars from fairy tales, but the actual night sky that had watched over Atlanta the night they met. Tamara sat in the rocking chair David had built with his own hands, their daughter sleeping peacefully in her arms. Hope Anderson Hayes had arrived 3 weeks early, as if eager to join the family that had waited for her with such anticipation. "She's perfect," David whispered from the doorway, still amazed by the sight of his wife and daughter together. "She's ours," Tamara replied, the wonder in her voice matching his own. The wedding had been small, but perfect, a ceremony in the community garden behind the health center, surrounded by family and neighbors whose lives they'd touched. Marcus had walked his mother down the aisle, while Zoe served as maid of honor. The twins had indeed been flower girls, scattering rose petals with the serious concentration of children given important jobs. Now their family was complete in ways David had never imagined possible. The twins, now 7 and thriving in therapy, had embraced their roles as big sisters with protective enthusiasm. Marcus was thriving at Georgia Tech on a partial football scholarship, the rest of his tuition covered by a foundation grant. Zoe had started high school in Atlanta, living with them full-time and excelling in advanced science classes. "Mama, is Hope awake?" Lucy's whisper came from the hallway. "Come see for yourself," Tamara said softly. Both twins crept into the nursery, their movements careful and reverent around their baby sister. They'd been present for every moment of the pregnancy, talking to Tamara's growing belly, helping choose nursery colors, practicing lullabies. "She has Daddy's nose," Lily observed. "And Mama's pretty skin," Lucy added. David settled into the chair beside Tamara's, watching his older daughters coo over their baby sister. This was the family portrait he'd never dared to imagine. Not perfect, but real. Not without challenges, but built on love and choice and the kind of commitment that could weather any storm. The David Anderson Medical Access Foundation now operated in 3 states, with plans to expand further. Tamara split her time between foundation work and motherhood with the same grace she brought to everything else, never making either role seem like compromise. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" she asked quietly while the twins entertained Hope with funny faces. "Different how?" "If I'd never taken that job cleaning your house. If you'd never noticed me. If we'd both been too scared to take risks." David considered the question seriously. A year ago, he'd been a successful but lonely man living in a beautiful but empty house with daughters who'd forgotten how to trust. Tamara had been a single mother, sacrificing everything for children she saw only on weekends, trapped in cycles of poverty and desperation. "I think we would have survived," he said finally. "But survival isn't the same as living." "No," she agreed. "It's not. So what would you do if someone saw your worth before you believe in it yourself? Would you run? Or would you build something that lasts?" Comment below with what you would have done in her shoes. Hope stirred in her arms, tiny fists reaching for nothing and everything. Tamara adjusted her daughter's position, marveling at how natural motherhood felt this time around. Chosen instead of circumstantial, supported instead of solitary. "I was thinking," David said, "about what you said that first night. About children needing to know they can take care of themselves. Independence is still important, but so is knowing when to accept help, when to let other people share the weight." Tamara looked up at him, seeing the man who'd learned to balance strength with vulnerability, success with presence. "Look at us, teaching each other lessons we didn't know we needed to learn." The twins had moved to the window, pointing out shapes in clouds while keeping up a steady stream of chatter about their day at school. Normal 7-year-old concerns. Playground politics, favorite subjects, plans for weekend adventures. Miss Chun says we're doing really good in therapy, Lily announced proudly. Really well, Tamara corrected gently. Really well, Lily repeated. She says we're brave for talking about our feelings. The bravest, David agreed, his voice thick with pride. Lucy turned from the window with the serious expression that meant she was processing something important. Daddy, are you happy we told about Mommy? The question that had haunted David for months. Were his daughters better off having spoken their truth, even though it had shattered his illusions about his first marriage? Yes, sweetheart. I'm proud of you for being brave enough to tell the truth. And I'm sorry it took so long for you to feel safe enough to talk. We feel safe now, Lucy said simply. Because of Mama Tamara, Lily added, using the name they'd chosen for their stepmother, different from Mommy, but equally precious. Tamara's eyes filled with tears she didn't try to hide. These children had chosen to trust her with their healing, their futures, their understanding of what family could look like. I feel safe too, she whispered. Later that evening, after the twins were asleep and Hope was settled in her crib, David and Tamara stood on their rooftop garden looking out at the city that had brought them together. The Atlanta skyline glittered below them, but Tamara's attention was caught by movement in the health center's parking lot several blocks away. Even at night, the building glowed with warm light. Evening clinic hours serving families who couldn't take time off work during the day. 300 families served last month, she said with quiet satisfaction. And counting. Mrs. Rodriguez told me yesterday that her granddaughter wants to be a doctor now. Says seeing women who look like her running the health center made her believe it was possible. David pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her hair, the warmth of her skin. That little girl isn't the only one whose world expanded because of you. Because of us, Tamara corrected. This is what partnership looks like. Not one person saving another, but two people building something bigger together. A comfortable silence settled between them as they watched their city sleep. Somewhere out there, Marcus was probably studying for his engineering midterms. Zoe was likely reading medical journals she'd borrowed from the health center library. The twins were dreaming whatever 7-year-olds dream about. Hope was growing stronger every day in the safety of a home built on love instead of desperation. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button, Tamara said suddenly, grinning at David's confused expression. Subscribe for more stories that make you feel, think, and maybe even heal a little. Are you practicing for your TEDx talk? David teased. Tamara had been invited to speak at next month's conference about healthcare equity and social justice. Maybe. Tell me in the comments what aspect of our journey resonated most with you. She continued in mock serious tone. And remember, the most powerful love doesn't rescue you from your life. It recognizes the strength that's been there all along. David laughed, that rich sound that had become the soundtrack of their happiness. You're ridiculous. You love me anyway. I love you because of it. As they headed inside to check on their children one last time before bed, both of them understood that this was what victory looked like. Not perfect lives without struggle, but the strength to face challenges together. Not fairy tale endings that required no effort, but real love that chose commitment every single day. Tamara paused at Hope's crib, watching her daughter sleep with the peaceful expression of a child who'd never known anything but safety. This baby would grow up knowing her worth, understanding that love was her birthright rather than something to be earned through sacrifice. What are you thinking? David asked softly. That she'll never have to choose between her dignity and her survival. That she'll grow up believing she deserves to be treated with respect and kindness. That she'll know the difference between love and desperation. Because of the world we're building for her. Because of the world we're building with her. And Marcus and Zoe and Lily and Lucy. All of us together, creating something none of us could manage alone. David wrapped his arms around his wife, looking down at their sleeping daughter, surrounded by the constellation ceiling that promised infinite possibilities. A year ago, he'd been a man who measured success in dollars and contracts. Now he understood that the most important deals couldn't be negotiated. They had to be built day by day, choice by choice, with people who saw your value before you recognized it yourself. "I love our life," he said simply. "So do I." And in the quiet of their nursery, surrounded by the evidence of love that had transformed two broken families into one whole one, David and Tamara Anderson Hayes held each other and their daughter and marveled at how far they'd traveled from that first day when she'd walked into his house carrying nothing but cleaning supplies and the courage to believe that everyone, including herself, deserved dignity, respect, and the chance to build something beautiful. The body she'd once offered as sacrifice now created life by choice. The house that had echoed with silence now rang with laughter. The man who'd forgotten how to hope now spent his days building a future worth believing in. And the woman who'd once thought survival was the best she could hope for now knew that sometimes, when you're brave enough to accept help and strong enough to offer love, you don't just survive, you flourish. Their story wasn't ending. It was just beginning.